Did you know that you're only 10% human? For every single human cell, you have 10 non-human bacteria cells in your body that make up your microbiome. Clostridium difficile is an infection that occurs when the other 90% of your cells get out of whack. Everyone watching this presentation and everyone in the world has gut bacteria and therefore is capable of contracting Clostridium difficile, otherwise known as C. diff. In fact, according to the CDC, nearly 500,000 Americans contract C. diff and 15,000 die from it each year. I have studied the human microbiome for years and have experienced various disorders involving gut microbiota. Clostridium difficile is a dangerous infectious disease that can have deadly consequences. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss the structure, function, symptoms, and treatments of C. diff. First, let's discuss what C. diff is. Clostridium difficile is a bacteria that, given the right environment, can grow wildly out of control, causing its host to become very sick and even die. Before you can fully understand C. diff, you need to understand the environment in which it populates, the human microbiome. A healthy human microbiome includes bacteria, fungi, and protists that number almost 100 trillion non-human cells and can weigh up to 2.5 pounds. The human microbiome is a combination of the microbial genetic information and non-human cells that inhabit humans. Research has found more than 2,000 different species of microorganisms in the gut, skin, nose, and almost every surface on the human body. Most of these microorganisms are not pathogenic, but rather mutualistic in nature. C. diff is occasionally found within a healthy microbiome in small populations without negatively affecting its human host. These small communities of C. diff aren't a problem for human hosts unless the delicate balance of good versus bad is thrown off. Large numbers of intestinal bacteria compete for nutrients and sites of attachment in the gut lining, preventing an overwhelming colonization of C. diff. This action is known as the barrier, or competitive exclusion effect. A healthy barrier allows C. diff to live within human bodies without infecting them. C. diff is a rod-shaped, gram-positive bacterium that is resistant to most antibiotics. It is found throughout the environment in soil, air, water, and human and animal feces, and food products such as processed meats. It is an anaerobic, endosporic organism. This means that it doesn't need oxygen to survive and that it can live in harsh environments. C. diff is extremely hardy and can survive for long amounts of time in environments devoid of food, such as kitchen countertops, hospital doorknobs, or any other surface. The spores are resistant to drying and heating and also have resistance to alcohol-based sanitizers and cleaners. One of the few ways to kill C. diff is to use chlorinated bleach. C. diff can also survive in spore form as long as 5 months. The ability of C. diff to survive in this resistant form poses quite a challenge for hospitals and public places. Now that we know what C. diff is, let's talk about the symptoms of C. diff. Since a properly functioning gut community is vital to human survival, there are lots of symptoms associated with C. difficile. Naturally, human functions involving gut bacteria are where most violent symptoms are experienced. Individuals that have contracted C. difficile will usually experience a range of symptoms including abdominal pain, bloating, cramping, nausea, fever, loss of appetite, and severe diarrhea. Without a healthy population of good bugs to suppress a bloom, human hosts can become sick within just a few hours of exposure. In severe cases, infected individuals can experience kidney failure, increased white blood cell count, dehydration, bloody stools, sepsis, and even death. When allowed to grow unabated, C. difficile reproduces within the human taxa at a phenomenally fast rate. In rare cases, your colon may rupture, causing bacteria from the colon to enter the abdominal cavity. If this occurs, surgery and hospitalization is needed immediately. In rare instances involving sepsis, C. diff can be deadly. Sepsis is a potentially life-threatening complication associated with infections such as C. diff. Sepsis occurs when chemicals released in the bloodstream to fight infection trigger inflammatory responses throughout the body. This inflammation can cause a cascade of changes that can damage multiple organ systems, causing them to fail. If sepsis progresses to septic shock, blood pressure can drop dramatically to deadly levels. Anyone can develop sepsis, but it's most common in individuals with weakened immune systems, such as individuals fighting a C. diff infection. Those most susceptible to C. diff infections are babies, elderly individuals, and those with compromised immune systems. Let's move on to the causes of Clostridium difficile. C. diff is extremely contagious and exists in abundance within our environment. In other words, we're rubbing shoulders with deadly C. diff on a regular basis. As previously discussed, the C. diff bacteria can grow, exist, and thrive in a multitude of environments. Clostridium difficile is transferred from one individual to the next in fecal matter. It sounds gross and unlikely, but you'd be surprised at how many surfaces can house the hardy bacteria. In the infamous 2012 study by the University of Arizona's Charles Gerba and Sherry Maxwell, microbiologists found that the handles on grocery store shopping carts tended to have more fecal bacteria than a typical public restroom. Gerba and Maxwell found that 72% of shopping carts contained fecal matter. Remember that alcohol-based wipes, sprays, and foams do not combat C. diff. Only bleach can kill C. diff. The best course of action is to wash your hands thoroughly after using the restroom and before eating with warm soapy water. Another factor in the cause of C. diff is the prolonged use of long-term antibiotics. Remember that a human's natural intestinal barrier prevents C. diff from growing out of control. Since antibiotics kill 97% of that barrier, our intestines are left vulnerable to infection. The CDC confirms that antibiotic-induced C. diff accounts for the majority of C. diff infections. It's important to not only understand what C. diff is, symptoms to look for, and causes of C. diff, but it's also important to know how to prevent and treat C. diff. Luckily, there are lots of options for preventing and treating C. diff if an early diagnosis confirms infection. We already talked about the importance of hand washing instead of relying on hand sanitizer, and how the only household cleaner that is effective against C. diff is bleach. But it's equally as important to promote the cultivation of a healthy, pathogen-fighting army of good bugs in your intestines. As outlined by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, it's no surprise that gut bugs flourish off of colorful plant-based foods and are suppressed by sugar and refined foods. This is good to know, since C. diff can only grow when there's room inside our intestines. Counterintuitively, most doctors treat C. diff with more antibiotics. Antibiotics most commonly used are listed here. C. diff returns in 30% of patients where antibiotics were used as treatment. Due to this practice, an increasing number of C. diff cases are becoming completely antibiotic resistant. This has spurred the situational use of a new and controversial treatment called fecal microbial transplantation. It's just what it sounds like. Microscopic samples of intestinal bacteria are transplanted from a healthy individual to patients infected with C. diff in order to repopulate the gut with good bugs strong enough to put the C. diff bacteria back in check. This seemingly disgusting but life-saving process has been performed by thousands of physicians in the United States already and saved even more lives. In conclusion, I hope you've learned something about the structure, function, causes, and treatments for Clostridium difficile. To summarize what we've discussed, C. diff is a rod-shaped, anaerobic, antibiotic-resistant bacterium that is found in soil, air, skin, and fecal matter. The most common symptoms include issues with the digestive tract, such as bloating and diarrhea. The most common cause of C. diff is exposure to antibiotics that wipe out our good bugs, making room for bad bugs to take hold. Best preventative measures include hand washing with warm soapy water and consuming a diet rich in colorful plants. Traditional treatment methods include antibiotics, but more recent therapies have included fecal transplants. Remember that there are lots of things you can do as part of your daily routine to safeguard yourself against deadly infections such as C. diff. The number, health, and strength of your bacterial army is well within your power. Don't neglect the other 90% of your body that is working hard to safeguard you against dangerous invasions of pathogens such as C. diff.